Alright, gonna make a video that will be up in the air as y'all seem to be wild on which videos you like. I don't know, but I want to talk about it. I run 2 games a week, one on Sunday and one on Wednesday. Might be going to make another game or 2 at some point. We'll see what happens. But let's talk about what my Wednesday game is going. It's a Pathfinder 1st edition game, so 40 plus classes to choose from. Because of that, I asked them to pick their classes out of a hat. Unnecessary story of how I went about that, but I'll admit, I am never going to do that again. Because it ain't near as fun, but it was an interesting attempt. But they got their classes. I told them to get a mythic level as well, which was their choice. I told them they were normal civilians up until a moment they woke up and suddenly had knowledge of how their power or power itself, and a draw towards Canobris, a city. If you know Wrath of the Righteous, you know the town, city, whatever. 2 of my 3 decided they didn't really care for the class they chose, so I let them pick a new class, and yada yada yada. Those 2 changed to a Deliverer Slayer and an Universalist Wizard. Both of these both of them with specific builds in mind. One is going with a Shield of God, and the other one with a Master Crafter. Honestly, cool characters. Unfortunately for this story, the Slayer is a high school student and has finals and stuff to deal with, so he wasn't there for this week. I've told him time and time again, his education is far more important than his game, so he was doing homework. And I want to say, that is good. Don't be like me. Do your homework. I knew this was coming in advance, so I had time to prepare. I sent the players that were there, 2 of them, to gather a book from a city I had named Crypt in the Whirlwind. That's the name of the place. I told them, I basically planned for them to have 3 options. They could sneak in, which was the primary idea I had, talk their way in and grab the book and run, or 3, guns blazing. None of them used guns. Originally, they intended to sneak into the city, but they literally parked their cart in front of the gate and let the guards just stare at them for a while. And I was realizing there was going to be a bit of a problem with that. So I sent an NPC out to invite them into the city. One of them took up the option, one of them did not. The Umbral Sorcerer, the Shadow Sorcerer basically, for those who know 5th edition, decided to take up the offer and went into the city, talking to a Dampier librarian, townsfolk, and various undead guards. He started getting information, started planning on how to go about getting the book, and a bunch of other stuff. He wanted to talk to the mayor of the city, the High Arcanist. As for the wizard outside of town, he spent a good long time crafting and rolling a minimum of 30 on his craft checks. As darkness fell, he set up an alarm spell and went to sleep, only to be awoken within 2 hours by something trying to pry into his brain. As in, psychically, not physically. He woke up, checked around, realized whatever the hell was in his brain was going to be well more than a match for his level 1 self, and sprinted into the town. Now, he ran into an NPC that I originally intended to be human, but I panicked said dwarf, so I impromptu tied him into the wizard's backstory, making him a rival clan. The wizard was human, but he was raised by dwarves in High Helm, so I basically panicked and fit him in. Dwarf and the wizard ended up talking for a while, and the dwarf actually invited him into the church he ran, a Torgus, whatever, cathedral. Meanwhile, the sorcerer, a fetchling, which I should have mentioned earlier, ended up getting rooms for the two, and they ended up sleeping for the night. In the morning, the sorcerer ended up talking with the High Arcanist, and they ended up figuring out quite a bit about the book and what was going on throughout the town. Town was primarily necromancers, I should point that out. As the sorcerer talked with the High Arcanist, he managed to figure some shit out, specifically about a gnome who out of nowhere started screaming and sending psychic blasts into the entire city. Undead taking care of it because, well, they don't have brains, they're zombies. The wizard ended up going to the church after crafting a icon for, well, it was his god, so. The sorcerer spoke with the dwarf, just kind of talked about the past, about his daughter, who was still alive, and the man's dead wife, or rather, the dwarf's dead wife. The sorcerer, learning about the gnome, decided, hey, can I see the place where he did that shit? The High Arcanist took him to it, and started investigating. Looked in the sand around the area and actually found that there was glass in the area. Now, looking into it, glass in sand, it happens, but it basically needs a super nuke in order to appear. So, the sorcerer was kind of thrown off by it. After looking around for a while, one piece of glass was very much different than the rest, as it looked like this. Some of you know what that is. Some of you don't. I won't give any more detail as to what this thing is. The sorcerer asked the Arcanist if he recognized the symbol made into the glass, and as the Arcanist saw it, he stopped. Said that they need to go to the crypt beneath the church of Torag that the dwarf had made. Inside the church, the dwarf and the wizard were chatting it up. They were telling about how the dwarf met his wife, who was in the grave before them. Talking about their daughter, who had, been traumatized by the psychic scream and didn't talk anymore. She could talk, she just didn't, and I was intending that, and still am intending that, for a future thing. Now, as the wizard was talking to the dwarf and the dwarf's kid, who I named Jen, but for some reason he keeps calling Jess, I don't know why, they started hearing a noise coming from the crypt. So the dwarf grabbed a hammer, instructed the wizard to follow him, expecting it to be, well, rats or dire rats. As they went in, there was a lot of evidence that it wasn't. They started noticing the graves were ripped open and were bitten by large, sharp teeth. Dire rats have flat teeth, so that they can rip through everything. Not sharp needle-like teeth. As they went into the crypts, they started noticing these teeth marks on everything, and torches suddenly disappearing as he tried to light them. He started theorizing that it was a ghoul, which wasn't entirely off, but wasn't very right either. As they went down the caves, their own lights, they started noticing footprints, clawed ones, and then found the foot that made them and what it was attached to. A thin, bright green, powerful ghoul, but a very specific one. A Leng ghoul. CR10. These players were level 1. I intended for these guys to run away. The High Arcanist and the Sorcerer came in just as they had found it, because I wasn't about to fucking do that to a single player. The High Arcanist told everyone to run, as he decided to distract the interdimensional undead. Oh, he distracted them, but not for very long, as they leapt on him and started consuming him. The Sorcerer, the Wizard, and the Dwarf booked it at that point. The Sorcerer and the Wizard throwing health potions over their shoulder to slow down the ghouls, which they did, so good job on them. As they ended up leaving the crypt, immediately the Dwarf and the Wizard started boarding up the door, and the Sorcerer ended up doing what he could, though not quite as much. The Dwarf grabbed his daughter, told her to basically get to a cart and grab as many people as she could and leave town, because Leng ghouls, they didn't know if they would be surviving that. I expected them to grab everyone in town and leave, but they ended up coming up with a different idea. They had about 20 healing potions on them. They went across town and asked everyone, hey, this is going on, give us a hand. Everyone grabbed healing potions and put it in a big old cauldron. Now, a cauldron of healing potions should normally deal 1d1 plus 1 damage to undead. I wasn't going to have that because this is the path they were going down. So, they put all the potions into a cauldron and started heating up the cauldron, basically making an undead toxic gas. This was awesome, so I started allowing it. As the undead ended up ripping through, the High Arcanist was one of them and started casting magic. As the Leng ghouls started dropping from the, gas of healing, the High Arcanist managed to stay up, but was still being eaten away by it. The citizens of the town of Crypt, which is what I named it because undead, started helping out using their own necromancy magics to try and counteract the necromantic ghouls. As the ghouls started dropping one by one, the High Arcanist kept up, and the wizard loaded up a crossbow, put a healing potion on the end of it, aimed, and fired. Now, ghouls, when they first turn undead, have a much lower dexterity due to, body stiffening. Word, help. Someone will just tell me. Anywho, so the AC was much lower, and the group took aim and fired. He rolled an 8 on the die. I told him to hand me that die. I put it on a 20. Now, I ended up changing a lot of rules because of this there. How they rules as written would have gone about it, they would have died. That wouldn't have been fun. So I told them they won. Now, they ended up realizing that there was more than just undead going on, because Leng is a realm of nightmares. The book they were going with was, well, for those that know, At the Mountains of Madness, a Lovecraft novel that I decided to port over here as a more informational book. Now, as they ended up figuring out everything, the town needed to declare a new High Arcanist, a new mayor, and they decided to go with the dwarf, who didn't want it but took it up. He gave the players the book they came hunting for, and he declared that the town was too dangerous for those that left to come back. His daughter, the elderly, the children, you know. So the players ended up going back to Canobris to mention what had happened. The wizard basically has now a kid that will become important to the story later. I also want to point out that at level 2 now, because I wasn't going to give him 9,000 experience, I just gave him a level for that. That wizard can craft at a plus 30. Basically, I've decided they're not going to pick up the MacGuffin. He's going to make the MacGuffin. So, that's going to be real fun as hell. But, that's basically what happened. The players ended up shooting my plans in the foot and being absolutely buck-fucking awesome with it. But that's the story, so shove off.